Hello and welcome to Castle's Corner. I am Coach Castle, and today I'll be responding to all of the hate email, hate comments, and general lack of education I see in the fitness world daily. For those of you who follow my channel or social media accounts, you will know that once every few months I post a challenge, an open challenge, to all personal trainers and coaches in the world, to debate me and to prove me wrong. Now, it has been 2.5 years so far, and out of the many thousands of hate emails, comments, and messages I have received, no personal trainer or coach has accepted the challenge to debate biomechanics with me. Now, this is no doubt due to the fact that they are wrong, and they know they're wrong, or perhaps they are simply dogmatic and not inclined towards intelligence. Their bro science goes completely against all actual data and science, including but not limited to our understanding of physics, anatomy, as well as exercise physiology. In this short video, I will be discrediting N.A.S.M certified personal trainers. The reason for this is a large portion of the certified personal trainers in America, and these are also the large portion of the trainers that send me hate emails and comments on my videos, citing their certification as to why I am wrong. However, they are as cowardly or as they are ignorant and dogmatic, as they refuse to answer my challenge. Therefore, I have taken matters into my own hands by going directly to the N.A.S.M certification website, pulling all of the various exercises that they teach, and then I'll be slowly breaking down in this video why they suck, why they're inefficient, and basically why your personal trainer is not yielding you the results that you're looking for. Now, what has been missing from the mainstream fitness instruction is a set of standardized rules or criteria which all exercises can be evaluated by. There needs to be a checklist of mechanical factors that can be applied across the board to all resistance exercises, which allows people to determine whether an exercise is optimally productive or highly efficient and safe, or high risk with little payoff. The fitness industry has failed to acknowledge that there are biomechanical factors that determine how efficient an exercise is, as well as how inefficient it is, whether there is sufficient stimulus for muscle growth, or is there little to no intensity, meaning little to no growth. Now, this is, of course, so they can continue selling you new gadgets and gizmos, useless training programs, useless machines, and their useless services, keeping you chained to them with your wallet by empty promises of being your friend, or soon, or it takes time. Now, this is not the video where I lecture you about the different biomechanical principles and rules of intensity or muscle growth. I have many other videos for that you're welcome to check out. This will simply be a breakdown of the common exercises that personal trainers use, why they're terribly inefficient at best and damaging at worst. Now, however, before getting into today's video, certain biomechanical parameters must be discussed and explained simply. So here is a simple list of factors you can use to determine the value or efficiency of an exercise. I will be citing several of these various factors during the video as an explanation for why various exercises are inefficient or damaging. So, for an exercise to be optimally efficient, it must have full range of motion within the correct resistance curve. For an exercise to be optimally efficient, it must pull insertion to origin in as straight a line as possible. For an exercise to be optimally efficient, it must be an isolated movement so as to allow a full contraction of the target muscle fibers. Also, for an exercise to be maximally efficient, the movement must be able to be performed under control, meaning the selected weight is one that can be tolerated till failure within the correct rep range following the correct principles of time under tension. And finally, for the exercise to be maximally efficient, it needs to be a unilateral exercise as opposed to a bilateral movement. A simple explanation, bilateral movement would be something like a barbell, where both of your hands are working together, and unilateral would be a single arm dumbbell curl. Now, these are only a few of the biomechanical principles to ensure proper exercise, or maximally efficient, resulting in maximal stimulus and growth. There are many others, however, for the purposes of discrediting the N.A.S.M certified personal trainers, these alone will suffice. So, to begin with, here is a list of 989 different exercises. To put it in perspective how ridiculous this is, for the abdominals alone, there are no less than 32 different exercises. Now, considering that your abs do not connect to your legs in any place on your body, and also the fact that they only have a few functions, mainly the one which is to bring your lower ribcage to the top of your pelvis by curling your spine. So needless to say, only one movement is actually required, the best one, not 32. So now you need to ask yourself, out of the thousands of different exercises in the world, how many are good, how many great, and how many perfect? So obviously, not all exercises are created equal. Now this list I'm about to go through is absolutely absurd, and it only covers a fraction of the exercises in the world. Now, the body only requires about 26 different exercises to be performed correctly to target every single major muscle group. Out of this list of almost 1,000 exercises, only 16 of the movements are actually effective movements. The rest fail miserably or do not come close to the level of efficiency or what the correct biomechanical exercises will provide. Also, many of these exercises are damaging or actually completely useless. Now, moving on here to the N.A.S.M certification website, where we're about to go through the exercise selection here, where they keep all of the exercises they teach their so-called personal training instructors who are supposedly very good. Now, I'm only going to be going through about 70 exercises, but that alone will be more than enough. We'll go through the exercises one at a time, and I'll try not to repeat things. As quickly as I can, I'll break down why they're ineffective or bad and damaging movements. Now, the first two movements that we see here are the barbell deadlift and the kettlebell deadlift. Now, just briefly here, it says that the deadlift will train your quadriceps, gluteus, hamstrings, and groin. So right away, this movement is disqualified due to the fact that it is a bilateral movement. It does not actually train your hamstrings at all, as something called reciprocal intervention interferes. Your glutes are not being stimulated correctly. Your quads are only receiving roughly 20 to 30% of the actual load that is compressing your spine. Your spine itself is holding an isometric contraction with your erector spinae, which is actually receiving all of the load in this movement. Not your quads, not your glutes, certainly not your hamstrings. You are spiking your blood pressure, severely taxing your central nervous system. I could keep going, but suffice to say, neither of these exercises is efficient for anything and will be very damaging. Furthermore, I don't like kettlebells very much, as they almost always ensure that you use momentum, and they are nothing more than an offset dumbbell. They go on my list of things that have almost no function, along with resistance bands and chains. Now, the next two exercises we'll be looking at here are the dumbbell Romanian deadlift and the lying leg curl. The Romanian deadlift says it works your glutes, hamstrings, and quads. The lying leg curl says it works your hamstrings and calves. So yeah, it's a lying leg curl. As for the Romanian deadlift, this is an unstable movement which actually targets your erector spinae and does not target your hamstrings at all. It is ineffective at targeting your glutes, and the same for your quads. As for the lying leg curl, I have no problem with the exercise except to mention that it is lying because it doesn't train your calf muscle. I would actually rate it a 9 out of 10 for your hamstrings, provided you follow the correct principles of time under tension, or a 1 second contraction or raising of the load, and 4 seconds to lower the load back to the starting position. Now, unfortunately, these principles are not taught to these N.A.S.M certified personal trainers, who will simply have you wildly swinging the weight with no control. Now, the next two movements we'll be looking at here are the barbell bicep curl and the floor bridge. As for the barbell bicep curl, disqualified because it is a bilateral movement as opposed to a unilateral. Furthermore, the use of the barbell also produces the use of momentum. As for the floor bridge, there is no movement to promote spinal flexibility. This is not an exercise. There is no way to sufficiently load your glutes with this exercise or any other muscle. Furthermore, it cannot be training your core as your back muscles are engaged, which are the opposite group to your core muscles, meaning once again, due to reciprocal intervention, these muscles are actually turned off. Next, we have the floor prone cobra pose, as well as good mornings. According to the N.A.S.M, the floor prone cobra pose will train your back and shoulders. This is, of course, absurd. This is simply a stretching movement used to work your diaphragm or belly breathing and not in any way an exercise. As for the good mornings, they supposedly train your hamstrings, glutes, and groin. Now, it has yet to be specified what your groin muscle is. I don't know one. Furthermore, while it does train your glutes, it does so in a very poor resistance curve with very poor range of motion. As for your hamstrings, they are not targeted at all beyond simply stretching them. Now we have the side plank and plank exercises. According to N.A.S.M, these exercises are a great way to train your abdominals. The issue here is that they have zero range of motion. meaning that this is an isometric contraction in your abdominals, which is by far the worst possible way you could train a muscle group. They have no benefits beyond sport-specific training. Now here we have some more planks. The plank walk-up and the straight arm plank. Needless to say, I would just be repeating myself, planks have no benefits. Moving forward to the prisoner squat and the squat jump. Pretty amazingly, the prisoner squat trains your glutes, calves, thighs. I suppose they forgot how to spell quadriceps, though they called it thighs instead. However, as well as your squats, they do not train your quads effectively, they do not train your calves at all, and they train your glutes in an extremely poor resistance curve with very poor range of motion. Not effective. The squat jump supposedly trains your entire body. This is, of course, completely false. Neither one of these exercises have any benefit beyond sport-specific training. Next, we have more squat movements, the Bulgarian split squat, as well as the goblet squat. As for the Bulgarian split squats, I would actually rate this an 8 out of 10 for the targeting of your glutes, provided you follow the correct time under tension principles. As for the goblet squat, it is exactly comparable to the first two, which were mentioned as being completely useless beyond sport-specific training. Also, not to mention, the goblet squat primarily loads your erector spinae again, not your glute, not your quads. And it's not even a muscle group it's supposed to be targeting, by the way. Next, we have the dumbbell front squat, followed by the squat thruster. As for the dumbbell front squat, it is just as useless as the goblet squat. The only difference is you'll be using a dumbbell and holding it in front of you. As for the squat thruster, it is simply a compromised version of the squat, coupled with a movement which not only unbalances you, but also causes shoulder impingement, damage to your body. A reoccurring theme you will notice with these exercises many of them are basically identical, except holding the weight in one hand or two hands or a different kind of weight. Now, for example, all the squats look identical, all the deadlift movements look identical, all the bench press movements look identical, all the overhead pressing movements look identical. You're just sacrificing stability or the kind of load. Now, if you have not already considered this, there is a hierarchy to all exercises. Not all exercises are created equal, and some are in fact perfect. And the perfect ones, of the perfect, I should say, none of them are these cookie-cutter compound movements which everyone performs and are extremely ineffective. I could end the video now simply by saying compound movements are ineffective, which would remove most of the list. But anyways, another example would be the kettlebell front squat, barbell front squat, etc. It's the same thing. And now as for the next one here, the bird dog pose, this is an exercise which will not stimulate target muscles or growth, as the load will not be sufficient. Now this is more about a balance and stability. Let's get into the pull-up, the band-assisted pull-up, both of which are not efficient movements for a multitude of reasons. Number one, it's a bilateral movement outside the correct resistance curve for every muscle involved. The fact that your lat's origin is on your spine means that the resistance must come opposite position loaded to your spine, not above and in front of it. None of the muscles involved have correct range of motion. It's a compound movement which automatically decreases the value to the target muscle groups. And as for the resistance band assisted pull-up, if you can't do a pull-up, you shouldn't even be trying to do a pull-up. You should be focusing on exercises to strengthen the muscles involved in that exercise. An example in this case is I would recommend the 30-30 lat pull. Now next we have the Romanian deadlift with barbell and the Russian twist. I won't go over the Romanian deadlift with the barbell, it's simply a duplicate. As for the Russian twist, it's supposed to be training your obliques. However, your obliques are not opposite resistance in this case. They will always be performed rapidly with the use of momentum, etc., so not good. In reality, your obliques and abdominals are basically just getting an isometric contraction, which is, as we've already discussed, the worst form of muscle training. Now we have the reverse crunch to knee up, which supposedly trains your core, obliques, latimus, abdominals, and back. However, this is inaccurate again for many reasons. You will notice they are very unclear about their definition of core, and they haphazardly throw in the word back as if that will explain some form of the muscles being trained. Now, if your abdominals are actually being engaged, your back by necessity or erector spinae will be disengaged. Now this movement primarily relies on momentum, followed by an isometric contraction of your abdominals, and finally a rolling up of your lower body and torso over the center of gravity, meaning the load of your body weight is being effectively balanced, meaning no force is being acted upon your abdominals beyond the isometric contraction. Now, as for the standard push-up which is taught, this is obviously suitable for beginners as a beginner's exercise. However, it is completely ineffective in terms of muscle growth for any particular muscle growth as the range of motion is limited. It is a bilateral closed chain exercise outside the proper resistance curve for your pectorals as well as your triceps. And pretty much always insufficient load will be placed upon your acting muscles, resulting in little to no muscle growth. Volume does not produce muscle growth, only adaptation to sufficient intensity. So next we have plyometric push-ups and pike push-ups, both of which are simply alternate versions of the traditional push-up and simply train other muscle groups ineffectively. I won't bother going to breaking them down or whatever. You get the idea. And here once again we have the inverted push-up and decline push-up. Now to start with, both of these names are incorrect and should actually be reversed, as when you're training your pectorals, the inverted angle will actually produce the decline angle necessary to train your pectorals efficiently, and the so-called decline angle would be training your upper chest if such a thing was possible. I'll get into why incline movements do not target your upper chest just a little bit later. And if you're not already seeing a common theme here, here's some more push-ups, archer push-up, modified push-up. They all have the same problems. Next we have the leg press for your calf, specifically. Now this is another exercise I would actually recommend. I would rate this a 9 out of 10 in terms of efficiency for muscle growth, provided you use the right weight and time under tension. Now again, the next exercise are jumping jacks and leg press. As for jumping jacks, useful as a warm-up, but that's about the extent. You won't grow muscle from doing these, obviously. As for the leg press, this is a horrible movement. Basically, your lower leg bone, which is the active lever of your quads, hamstrings, etc., it only reaches about a position of 30 degrees. So it's only about a 33% active lever. And on top of that, most people, of course, will load the machine too heavily with way too much weight. They will have a severely limited range of motion. They'll place their feet even higher on the plate so as that they can move more weight easier, and they won't lower it all the way. And of course, they'll assist themselves by placing their hands on their knees and driving upwards. So whenever you perform a movement such as leg press, squat, goblet squat, deadlift, etc., you have to understand this is a compromised movement. It's not good for you to do. It's not going to grow muscle efficiently, and it will be damaging your body. Now, just for this particular one, obviously your quads, your glutes, everything are not being trained in the correct range of motion. You're barely receiving the load that you have on the machine. If you want a more comprehensive or technical explanation, just check out my other videos, the ego lifting versus biomechanics series, where I mathematically break down and demonstrate with anatomy how stupid these exercises are. But for the purpose of this video, it's just not an effective movement and has high risk. Next, single leg press and box jumps. As for the single leg press, it's slightly better than a double leg press due to its unilateral nature. It still has all the associated problems of the double leg press, so not as efficient. As for the box jumps, unless you already have sport-specific reasons for doing these, they're not a useful movement for muscle growth and also not good for cardio. Basically, you shouldn't even be doing these as they are high risk, as the more fatigued you get, the risk of injury increases. Now next we have the iron cross and kettlebell crush curl with squat. As for the lying iron cross, it supposedly trains your glutes, chest, erector spinae, and back. Now, obviously, no it doesn't. This is an isometric contraction. You get the idea. Also, body weight's insufficient for muscle growth. And again, it ignores the rules of reciprocal intervention. As for the kettlebell crush curl squat, this is simply a bastardized version of the goblet squat, which I have already addressed. Next we have face pulls and cable crossovers. As for the face pull, they are extremely vague about what muscles are actually being trained, simply claiming shoulders, back, and arms. Now, if this didn't bother you enough, it's just a shit exercise. It's a single point bilateral exercise, moving your shoulder cradle in a way it's simply not supposed to be moved. You are doubling your levers or your two arm bones, which is reducing the magnification by a factor of 10 or 12. Translating, you need to add more weight to the exercise, further straining your shoulder cradle. It does not target correctly a single muscle on its body. It's outside their correct resistance curve. It's high risk. Just don't do it. As for the forward cable crossover, they claim it targets your shoulders, chest, and anterior deltoid. A little bit redundant since they said shoulders and then anterior deltoid. While this movement does maximally use your levers, it is compromised in both its resistance curve, range of motion, and also the fact that it's bilateral. Again, performing this exercise standing too will also mean you're using momentum, obviously. If you haven't heard this enough, momentum is for morons. You should not be using momentum in your training. Next, we have the standing tubing row and close grip bench press. As for the standing tubing row, they claim it trains your upper back and mid back, by which I assume they mean your mid trapezius and upper trapezius. However, as has been previously addressed, any form of rowing movement does not train your traps in the slightest. This is because your traps do not connect to your arms at any place on your body. The muscles actually being targeted with this exercise are your rear deltoids and lats. Furthermore, using a resistance band is completely useless, an exercise in futility, and you should simply throw them in the garbage. Resistance bands operate outside the correct resistance curve and increase fatigue and risk for no purpose. Next, we have the dead bug and lunge jump. The dead bug supposedly trains your core, another useless distinction of nothing. Doesn't say what's actually being trained. Now, so you know what is actually being trained is your diaphragm and your intercostals. Now, this exercise is good diaphragm training, and, provided it's performed correctly, which I doubt very much these so-called trainers know how to do, considering they don't even know that it trains their diaphragm. Next, we have the lunge jump, which supposedly trains full body, thighs, and calves, which again is redundant. The lunge jump is a movement with no additional force or load added. It's simply an explosive movement for sport-specific training. Body weight will always be insufficient stimulus for muscle growth. Next, we have the seated machine row and child's pose. As for the seated machine row, this supposedly trains your back, lats, rhomboids, arms, biceps, but again, very redundant. And moving forward, this exercise does not actually train your biceps, number one. It's bilateral. They did not name the muscle group actually responsible for moving the load, which would be the rear deltoids, as they are opposite position loaded in this exercise. And I've already addressed the other aspects of these movements earlier. The child's pose, to keep it simple, is just an isometric contraction. It's a useless exercise. Next, we have the tuck jump and two-arm standing cable fly. The tuck jump I've already addressed, basically useless, outside sport-specific training. As for the two-arm standing cable fly, I've already basically addressed all the fucking problems with this thing. It's just being repeated, not a good exercise. Next, we have bench dips and chest presses. As for the bench dips, claims that it targets your triceps, anterior deltoid, and chest. Bench dips do not target your triceps, as your lower arm it does not move, which is the active lever of your triceps. If your arm does not move, the triceps are not engaged. An example would be even if I was to cover the dip bars in oil and have you do dips, you would still be able to perform the dips. Your hands would not slide backwards, meaning your triceps have no involvement. As for the anterior deltoids, these are actually the primary muscle responsible for the movement. However, you will be performing the movement in a compromised position, overstretching your anterior deltoids. Also with very poor range of movement and resistance curve. Furthermore, you have your upper body vertical or parallel with the gravity, which just compromises the whole movement, and most people use momentum and even shorter range of motion to bang out more so-called reps, not caring that there's no muscle growth occurring. They simply want more reps. And of course, it's a bilateral movement which lowers the effectiveness. As for the machine chest press, it's a compromised range of motion, bilateral exercise, outside correct resistance curve, ego loaded, no use, almost no time under tension ever applied. Any form of bench press will receive less than a 5 from me in a score of efficiency. Of course, some are worse than others. Next, we have the single-arm dumbbell chest press and the two-arm dumbbell chest press with band. The single-arm chest press itself is a good movement due to the fact that it's unilateral with a semi-decent range of movement and a decent resistance curve. The primary issue is one of stability. It would be very difficult to stabilize your self-efficiency while loading your target muscle with sufficient weight to cause musculature growth, as well as the fact that this is a flat movement, not decline. Decline would be a superior angle for targeting all of your pectoral fibers. As for the two-arm dumbbell chest press with resistance band, I'm sure you'll already know what I'll say about this, so I'll just leave it alone. Now we get to the single-arm incline dumbbell chest press and two-arm incline dumbbell chest press. Both of these, of course, have the same associated problems, but because it's an incline movement, it's a different resistance curve. It doesn't target your chest at all. It targets maybe 3 to 4% of your pectoral fibers. The rest is all clavicular and front deltoid. I repeat again, this movement does not train your upper chest. For that, you will need a decline bench press. Next, we have the lying leg curl, 2-leg concentric, single leg eccentric. Now, this supposedly targets your hamstrings, calves, and thigh. Again, forgot to spell quads. However, it is obviously not targeting your calves or your quads, as I assume you understand that by now. Your hamstring is engaged the entire time. This is a very efficient exercise. I would rate it a 9 out of 10, provided you follow the correct time under tension principles. Next, we have the lying leg curl. Identical to the previous, except performed with 2 legs. Then we have seated leg curls and single leg seated leg curl. The first thing I noticed is the seated leg curl, which uses 2 legs, uses your hamstrings and calves according to them. However, the single leg seated leg curl apparently uses your calves, hamstrings, and thighs, or again, quad, I presume. How funny is that? Now, again, aside from the fact that they obviously don't know what muscles are actually being trained, or how to perform things with correct time under tension, or basic principles, these actual 2 exercises I would rate a scale of 10 out of 10, again, provided you perform them correctly. Next, we have the single leg squats and single leg squat touchdown. I know both of these are basically just a pistol squat, and they have all the same issues associated with a standard squat, except that the movement will also be compromised due to it being a single leg movement. This is no benefit to doing this, and attempting to incorporate balanced movements during your exercise is really dumb. For maximum muscle growth, you want to have as stable a position as possible while moving only the individual levers or target muscles you're attempting to work for maximal results under control. Next, we have the single leg squat to row and barbell bench press. You probably already know exactly what I'm going to say about these, so I'll just leave them alone. I've already addressed similar variants. So, as for the incline barbell bench press and foam roller of the adductors, following this point, we're going to get into some weird foam roller stretch, so don't worry about that. I'm not getting into the stretching that they're doing wrong as well, just the exercises. So as for the incline barbell bench press, as previously mentioned, this does not train your chest in the slightest, only your clavicular and your front delts. Furthermore, it's bilateral deficit, poor range of motion, correct resistance curve, and will cause shoulder shearing and shoulder impingement syndrome, due to the wear and tear over time. So, needless to say, I hope this video helps. I hope you understand your trainers are morons and you'd be much better off doing it yourself. If one of your trainers has this certification and claims it means something, just understand a certification is absolutely worthless. It means nothing. It's simply an argument from authority. It's just like somebody saying, look at this great body I have been genetically gifted with and pumped full of steroids to look like this. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. However, these N.A.S.M personal trainers apparently are never correct in terms of efficiency. So I would highly recommend you get yourself a new trainer, or better yet, do it yourself. It's not that hard to learn the correct movements, and with a little bit of discipline, you'll be on your way in no time at all. You're already going to the gym. Why don't you learn the most efficient exercises to make the best use of your time, maximizing your growth and recovery? You do not need a personal trainer. You do not need a coach. You don't need me. What you do need is the correct knowledge applied consistently for a long time, generating the results that you desire. Again, this will come from discipline, and discipline is only acquired by consistent daily effort. Discipline is the root of all good things. Nothing great has ever been accomplished without someone having discipline leading the movement. Discipline, again, is not a skill. It's not something you're born with. You're not genetically gifted to be disciplined. This is something every man and woman and child can master. The first step is simply sacrificing your ego, be willing to admit you know nothing, look foolish, and start at the beginning. We can all do this voluntarily by choice, and I strongly recommend you choose science over ignorance and discipline over regret, and you live a life that you yourself will be proud of. Now, as always, guys, never believe something based on what you've heard or read. Don't believe somebody because they have a good body or a certification or if they've been coaching for 30 years. It means absolutely nothing. People are gullible morons and will believe anything. Don't need to believe me, okay? Don't do it. Do your own research. Come to your own conclusions. It doesn't take that much time. Now, that being said, the laws of mechanical physics are well understood and absolute, as are the laws and functions of anatomy. So unless you're an alien, this information applies to you. And as always, to all of you personal trainers, if you actually watch this video and you have the balls to come debate me, make sure you understand physics, anatomy, and exercise physiology, as well as biochemistry before you come at me, okay? Now again, guys, if this was helpful and you want more videos like this, please remember to like, share, comment, subscribe. Helps the channel grow, everybody. So, everybody, stay on your grind. Do things effectively, efficiently. Don't waste your life. And learn to love yourself so you treat yourself like somebody you care about and you have the discipline to push forward in the face of all adversities, no matter what.